The movie begins on July 8, 1986, in a small town called Wilson. There, we are introduced to two friends, Pierre and Timu. One day, the two are sitting inside an apartment, watching a mysterious video with a little girl named Pia. As soon as the video ends, something inside Pierre seems to change. His behavior suddenly becomes disturbing, and without saying much, he suggests that they leave in the car. While driving, Pierre notices Pia nearby. A horrifying thought crosses his mind. He immediately reverses the car, grabs the little girl, and drives her to a deserted wheat field. The place is completely silent, with no one around to witness what is about to happen. Pierre begins chasing the terrified Pia through the field. Realizing that she is in danger, the little girl desperately runs for her life. But no matter how hard she tries, she cannot escape. Pierre eventually catches her and brutally attacks her. After torturing the innocent child, he leaves her lifeless body in the middle of the field. Timu watches the entire crime unfold with his own eyes. Although he never lays a hand on Pia himself, he also does nothing to stop his friend. Instead, he silently follows Pierre's orders. As they prepare to leave, Timu notices that Pia's headphones have fallen to the ground. He quietly picks them up and starts walking back toward the car. Only then does Pierre realize that Pia is dead. Panic instantly takes over. He begs Timu to help him, but Timu is too terrified to get involved and simply sits inside the car. Left with no other choice, Pierre carries Pia's lifeless body to the trunk, throws her bicycle inside as well, and disposes of everything in an attempt to erase every trace of the crime. Before leaving, Pierre even orders Timu to throw away Pia's headphones so that no evidence is left behind. 2 weeks pass after the horrific incident, but Pierre's disturbing behavior doesn't change. One day, he parks his car outside an amusement park and spends his time watching young girls with a creepy obsession. At the same time, Pierre notices Timu sitting on a bus, seemingly trying to leave. He attempts to stop him, but the bus drives away before he can do anything. Then, the story takes a massive leap forward by 23 years. We are introduced to Pia's mother, who has never been able to move on from the loss of her daughter. Every single day, she visits the same wheat field where Pia was murdered, jogging to the spot and stopping beside a memorial cross that was placed there in her daughter's memory. The story now shifts to the present day, where we meet another young girl named Sanika. She skips school that day, and as expected, her parents become furious and scold her. Wanting to escape their anger, Sanika lies to them, claiming that she is leaving for tennis practice. However, instead of going to practice, she calls her friend Mary and asks her to meet at a nearby amusement park. To make sure her parents don't become suspicious, she even sends them a message, saying that she won't be coming home that night because she'll be staying at her friend's house. As evening approaches, Mary still hasn't arrived. Sanika grows increasingly nervous and waits anxiously, wondering whether she should just give up and return home. In her anxiety, she completely fails to notice a man sitting inside a parked car outside the amusement park, silently watching her every move. The scene then cuts to Detective David, who is assigned an old unsolved case that has remained a mystery for decades. The file reveals the horrific murder of a young girl back in 1986. Her body had been discovered near a lake a few days after she disappeared, but investigators had found almost no evidence. The only clue was a witness who had reported seeing a red car near the lake on the day of the murder. There was also another shocking detail. A young boy who might have known something about the case had taken his own life. Even with these clues, the killer was never identified. As David studies the case, he notices something strange. The murder happened on July 8th, and today is also July 8th. The coincidence immediately catches his attention. The story then returns to Sanika. With Mary still nowhere to be found, she finally decides to head back home. But the moment she starts walking away, she realizes that someone is following her. She hesitates, slowly turns around, and sees the same mysterious man stepping out of his car. Before we learn what happens next, the scene cuts away once again. We then see the unknown man disposing of Sanika's bicycle in the very same wheat field where little Pia was murdered 23 years earlier. Not long after, news of Sanika's disappearance begins spreading across television channels. Among those watching the report is Timu, who has spent the last 23 years building a peaceful life with his family in another city. But the moment he sees the news, memories of that horrifying day come rushing back. The moment Timu learns that Sanika's disappearance is almost identical to Pia's case from 23 years ago, he is completely shaken. The memories he has tried to bury for years suddenly come flooding back. Even though he wasn't the one who committed the murder, the guilt has never left him. He still blames himself for standing there and doing nothing to stop the crime. Meanwhile, Detective David discovers that Sanika's case mirrors Pia's in almost every detail. Just like before, the police searched the same lake where Pia's body had once been found, hoping to uncover some evidence. But despite an extensive search, they come up empty-handed once again. Unable to live with his guilt any longer, Timu lies to his wife and secretly returns to Wilson, the town where everything began. At the very same time, David receives a visit from his retired former colleague who brings him an old box filled with evidence from Pia's unsolved murder. He strongly believes that solving Pia's case is the key to finding Sanika and insists that both crimes were committed by the same person. As David and his partner dig through the old files, they uncover an important clue. Around the time Pia disappeared, another young girl had reported seeing a red car near the area. Back then, investigators questioned hundreds of owners of red cars, but not every lead had been followed. A list of the remaining vehicles still exists, giving David a fresh direction to continue the investigation. Meanwhile, Timu finally comes face to face with Pierre after all these years. Pierre is genuinely surprised and excited to see his old friend. He warmly welcomes Timu into his house, and the two sit down to talk as if nothing had ever happened. But Timu isn't there for a friendly reunion. Without warning, he asks Pierre a chilling question: whether he had anything to do with Sanika's disappearance. Pierre immediately denies every accusation. He claims that what happened 23 years ago was the biggest mistake of his life, says he has deeply regretted it ever since, and insists that he has spent years praying to God for forgiveness. He even apologizes to Timu for dragging him into that nightmare. Despite Pierre's emotional words, Timu isn't convinced. Fear and suspicion continue to grow inside him. Unable to trust his old friend any longer, he leaves the house, more disturbed than ever before. Just as Timu is about to leave, Pierre suddenly stops him and hands him a ladder. He insists that Timu help him with a small task before leaving. After climbing up, Timu notices a video playing nearby. The disturbing footage immediately grabs his attention. Even though it disgusts him, he finds himself unable to look away. The video brings back memories that Timu has spent 23 years trying to forget. Overwhelmed with shame and guilt, he finally turns it off. Unable to control his emotions any longer, he breaks down in tears. The following day, Timu visits a nearby park, but Pierre finds him once again and insists that he come back home with him. Timu has a terrible feeling that Pierre is hiding something, so instead of following him, he runs away. By now, the burden of his guilt has become unbearable. Timu finally makes up his mind to confess everything to the police. He walks all the way to the station, determined to tell the truth. But when the moment comes, fear takes over, and he simply cannot bring himself to speak. He leaves without saying a single word. Completely broken, Timu returns home. There, he unexpectedly meets Pia's mother, who is visiting the apartment for an unrelated reason. During their conversation, Timu asks about her family, and the mention of Pia instantly brings tears to her eyes. She painfully recalls how her little daughter was murdered 23 years ago. Feeling guilty for bringing up such painful memories, Timu quietly apologizes and leaves. A short while later, Pia's mother notices that Timu never actually drove away. Instead, he is sitting alone inside his car, crying uncontrollably. Watching him from a distance makes her suspicious. She begins wondering whether this man knows something about her daughter's murder. Determined to find answers, she later contacts Detective David and tells him everything she witnessed. She also hands over Timu's visiting card, explaining that he had given it to her in case she ever needed to contact him. Meanwhile, Detective David and his team continue investigating every remaining owner of a red car from the old case. Just as the investigation starts gaining momentum, David receives an urgent phone call and is forced to leave immediately. His partner continues the investigation alone and eventually heads to Pierre's house. At the same time, Pierre is sitting beside the very lake where Pia's body was dumped 23 years earlier. As he stares silently at the water, his phone suddenly rings. It's his furious wife, who lashes out at him for disappearing without a word. He hasn't returned home for 3 days, and to make matters worse, their daughter has recently been injured after a bad fall. Before Pierre can even speak to his daughter, his wife angrily hangs up the phone. At that very moment, someone knocks on the door. When he opens it, he finds Detective David's partner standing outside, ready to question him. The detective immediately starts asking about Pierre's red car, and then brings up both Pia's murder and Senika's disappearance. But the moment he asks one crucial question, "Where were you on July 8th?" Pierre completely loses his composure. Clearly shaken, he nervously walks back inside the house. Meanwhile, Detective David visits Timu's home to question him as well. However, Timu's wife tells David that her husband has gone out of town. Refusing to give up, David heads to Timu's workplace instead. There, while examining his computer, he discovers disturbing videos involving children. The discovery immediately raises suspicion, making it appear as though Timu could be responsible for the crimes. Back at Pierre's house, the detective who came to question him begins sensing that something isn't right. Inside the house, Pierre secretly retrieves a knife along with an old diary. As he approaches the detective, he quickly hides the knife and casually hands over the diary instead. Pretending to stay calm, he explains that it contains his daily routine and asks the detective to check where he was on July 8th. Unable to find anything suspicious in the diary, the detective leaves without realizing how close he had come to danger. At the same time, Timu returns to the lake where Pia's body had been dumped 23 years earlier. The guilt he has carried for decades finally becomes too much to bear. Overwhelmed by regret, he drives his car straight into the lake, choosing to end his own life. As soon as the police receive the news, they rush to the scene and begin pulling the submerged vehicle out of the water. Detective David and his team also arrive, now convinced that Timu was the killer all along. But as the recovery operation continues, the investigation takes a shocking turn. Along with Timu's body, the police also discover the body of Senika hidden in the same lake. This seems to confirm everyone's belief that Timu kidnapped and murdered the young girl before taking his own life. The case appears to be solved, and the investigation is officially closed. David, however, isn't convinced. Something about the entire case doesn't feel right to him. Before the file is closed, he carefully goes back through the old evidence once more. As he studies the crime scene photographs and listens again to the original witness recordings, he begins to suspect that Timu may have been innocent all along, and that the real killer is still out there. While going through the old case evidence one last time, David notices something that everyone else had overlooked. In one of the crime scene photographs, Pia's headphones are clearly visible. Then he listens again to the eyewitness statement and realizes something even more important. The witness had seen someone throw those headphones from the passenger side of the red car. That could only mean one thing. There were 2 people inside the vehicle that day. Yet the investigation had focused on only one suspect all these years. Convinced that the real killer is still free, David immediately approaches his senior officer and requests that the case be reopened. However, his request is rejected. His superior argues that Timu's DNA was found on Pia's headphones, making him the obvious culprit. But David refuses to accept that conclusion. He points out that Senika's postmortem revealed she had not been abused before her death. Based on Timu's past, if he had truly been the killer, the pattern of the crime would have been completely different. Instead, Senika was simply murdered, suggesting that someone else was responsible. David explains his theory that 2 men were involved in Pia's murder 23 years ago. He believes one of them was Timu, not as the killer, but as a silent witness who failed to stop the crime. Years later, the real murderer lured Timu back to Wilson, manipulated the situation, and framed him for Senika's murder as well. In the end, the overwhelming guilt drove Timu to take his own life. Despite David's reasoning, his senior officer refuses to reopen the investigation. With no official support, the case remains closed, and the truth is buried once again. However, the movie isn't over yet. In the post-credit scene, we see the same red car from the beginning of the film. That final shot quietly confirms what David had suspected all along. Pierre was the true mastermind behind both murders, yet he managed to escape without facing justice. When Pierre later learns that Timu has taken his own life, he is visibly devastated. Even though he was responsible for manipulating the entire situation and framing his old friend, he never actually wanted Timu to die. Now, in addition to carrying the guilt of murdering innocent girls, Pierre is also forced to live with the burden of his best friend's death. And with Pierre left alone to suffer under the weight of his own crimes, the movie finally comes to an end.